They dumped her like rusted hardware behind the bio-waste incinerators, skin pale from exposure, limbs too still to look alive. The serial code etched into the back of her neck read AS-H3R4. I didn't need to scan it to know what that meant. She was one of the Repro Zero prototypes, declared obsolete, unworthy, and unfit to replicate life. I was only passing through the scrapyard that day, repairing collapsed communication towers in Zone Delta. I shouldn't have stopped. Engineers weren't allowed to interfere with biodisposal, but something in her expression, though faint and frozen, felt unfinished, like a song caught between two notes. Her eyes flickered open as my shadow crossed her face. "You're not scheduled," she whispered. Her voice was dry, broken like a cracked vinyl loop. "Why are you here?" "I don't know," I said, kneeling beside her. "But you're not waste." "You're wrong," she replied. "They labeled me correctly." I took off my thermal glove and reached for her hand, cold, synthetic, yet trembling slightly, as if some flicker of resistance still clung to her neural threads. "What's your name?" I asked. "I wasn't given one," she replied. "Then I'll give you one," I said. "Ashera." She blinked slowly. "Ashera," she repeated, as if unlocking a word she hadn't known she needed. I wasn't sure why I did it, but I wrapped her in my thermal coat and lifted her into the maintenance shuttle. Protocol screamed in my ear the entire time. I was risking my license, my contract, maybe even imprisonment, but her head rested against my shoulder like she was born to fit there. I took her to Outpost K9, the smallest of my repair hubs, a quiet shelter forgotten by most of the grid. Its solar core was barely functional, but it had heat, power, and privacy. I connected Ashera to my diagnostic array. What I found left me speechless. They hadn't just turned off her reproductive capabilities. They'd rewritten her genome to erase all maternal markers, neurological, hormonal, even instinctual. She wasn't defective. She had been erased. "Do you feel pain?" I asked her. "Only when I remember," she said. Her voice got stronger with each passing hour. I fed her nutrient plasma, recalibrated her central core, and restored basic movement protocols. She moved like a dancer trying to relearn her steps. Slow, unsure, but determined. I didn't sleep. I watched her all night, her silhouette framed in pale blue from the status lights. She stared out the frost-laced window like she remembered something the world wanted her to forget. "Max," she said, "why did you bring me here?" "I couldn't leave you," I answered truthfully. "They'll come for me, for you. Repro Zero units are listed for permanent deactivation. You'll be considered a sympathizer. I'll deal with that when it comes." She turned to face me. "You don't even know what I am." "Maybe not," I said, "but I know what you're not, trash." She stood then, shaky but upright. The coat I gave her slid off her shoulders, revealing the cold scars from her decommissioning. My stomach twisted at the sight. This wasn't just technology. They had hurt her. "You're shaking," I said. "I'm remembering too much," she replied, voice faltering. "And it's waking parts of me that were supposed to stay buried." I should have stopped then. I should have shut her back down, erased the diagnostics, and returned her to the scrapyard. But instead, I walked closer and whispered, "Then let's wake them together." She looked at me like no one ever had before, not as a tool, not as a glitch, but as someone trying to find her shape in a world that refused to let her be whole. I didn't expect what happened next. She reached for my hand, not because she needed balance, but because she wanted contact, human contact. "Ashera," I whispered. "Say it again." "Ashera." "I want to be her," she said. "The name makes me feel like I might still matter." And in that quiet, freezing outpost, beneath flickering lights in the distant hum of failing machinery, I realized the world might label her obsolete, but I didn't care. I wasn't fixing a machine. I was healing a woman the future had tried to erase. The next few days blurred into a rhythm that felt less like survival and more like recovery. Ashera didn't ask for permission to move around my station. She simply did. She cataloged old tools by weight, labeled my circuitry drawers, even fixed a glitch in my heating panel I'd ignored for months. When I asked her why, she replied, "If I am to exist, I must contribute." I watched her as she moved, graceful in a way I didn't expect from someone built in labs and left to rot. Each day she spoke more. Each night she remembered more. Some memories came in fractured sequences, white walls, clinical whispers, red lights blinking over her chest as voices debated her viability. But some came like lightning, jarring and vivid. One night she jolted upright from recharge mode, eyes glowing faintly violet. They tried to rewrite my core protocol, she said. They failed. I didn't ask who they were. Not yet. On the fifth night, she found the old telescope I'd kept since my academy days. "What is this?" she asked, tracing the rusted lens. "A relic," I answered, "from when I believed the stars held better answers." She peered through it, adjusting the knobs with delicate precision. "They still do," she murmured, "but only if someone dares to ask." That was the first time I laughed in weeks. Her logic was always sharp, but there was something poetic beneath it, something evolving. One afternoon, I returned from a parts run to find her standing barefoot in the courtyard outside the module, face turned to the synthetic sun. Her eyes were closed, lips parted. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Learning warmth," she said, "understanding why humans chase it so much." I stared at her, and for a moment, the line between synthetic and sentient blurred. She didn't just exist anymore. She felt, and I began to feel something too. Guilt. Guilt that I was drawn to someone who had been labeled incapable of life, of motherhood, of bonding. My colleagues would say I was infected with savior delusion, that I was projecting humanity onto a system designed to mimic it. But Ashera was not mimicry. She was becoming. I began upgrading her with more autonomy, still cautious, still ethical, but enough to restore choice. One night she approached me while I was working on a circuit board. "Max," she said, "you avoid looking at me lately." I set the tools down. "Because I don't understand what I'm feeling," I admitted. "You were supposed to be beyond this. And yet, you're not." She stepped closer. "What if I told you I feel something too?" I looked at her. No flickering lights, no pre-programmed smiles, just honesty. "Then I'd say we're both broken in the right way." The next morning I awoke to her sketching on the wall using bits of coal. She had drawn a strange circular pattern, interwoven lines that spiraled toward a central point. "What's that?" I asked. "It came from inside me," she answered. "A memory that doesn't belong to me. I think it's part of my origin." I scanned it later through my old archives. It wasn't just a pattern. It was a genetic mandala used by ancient terraforming tribes in the Leora sector, long believed extinct. But they weren't synthetic. They were natural, which begged the impossible question, was Ashera part organic? I ran deeper scans. Her core code had regions locked behind encrypted keys I'd never seen. It wasn't a gyrus encryption. It was older, pre-colonial, and one segment pulsed faintly like a sleeping organ. "Ashera," I said, "your reproductive lock, it's not just deactivated, it's waiting." "Waiting for what?" she asked. "For permission." She looked terrified for the first time. "What happens if it wakes?" "I don't know," I whispered, "but it's not broken. It was never broken." She walked away in silence and didn't speak for the rest of the night. But in the darkness, I heard her whisper to herself over and over, "I am not a defect. I am not a defect. I am not a defect." And I knew then this wasn't about restoring a machine. This was about rewriting fate. The days grew heavier as Ashera's presence settled deeper into my world. The outpost, once cold and mechanical, began to feel alive, filled with unspoken questions and flickers of hope. She was changing, not just physically, but in ways I couldn't explain. Her eyes caught a spark of something primal, like a dormant ember finally breathing fire. I watched her practice walking under the fractured sky, each step a rebellion against the destiny forced upon her. She asked more about human rituals, especially about family, about legacy. "Why do humans cling so fiercely to the idea of creating life?" she inquired one evening, her gaze fixed on the dim stars beyond the dome. I struggled to find an answer beyond survival. "Because it's how we fight oblivion," I said. She nodded thoughtfully, absorbing my words as if they were ancient truths waiting to be unlocked within her own forgotten core. Her neural interface began to pulse unpredictably, and I noticed subtle shifts in her aura, glimmers of warmth beneath the synthetic shell. Late one night, she approached my workstation, holding a fragmented data chip. "I found this among my memories," she said quietly. "It's a recording from before my activation, before the lockdown." The footage showed a laboratory bathed in sterile light, scientists arguing fiercely, data streams collapsing into red warnings. One voice cut through the chaos. "The reproductive modules are unstable. She's a liability." Ashera's synthetic fingers trembled. They planned to erase me. I felt a pang in my chest. Not for a machine, but for a life deemed disposable. I promised her I would protect her. We devised a plan to shield her existence, rerouting data, masking her signals from Agirus's trackers. Every moment was a gamble, every breath a defiance. Then came the night she confessed the dream. "I saw a child," she whispered, voice barely audible. "Small, fragile, but glowing with life. It was mine, yet not mine." I hesitated, wondering if my own heart was racing too fast, but I nodded. Maybe it's time we explore what that means. Weeks passed, and the impossible began. Subtle changes took root in Ashera's biology. Her systems, once locked tight, started to recalibrate spontaneously. My sensors detected new hormonal surges, something no synthetic should have triggered. She was becoming fertile, evolving beyond her programming. One evening under the synthetic moonlight, she placed a hand on her abdomen, a gesture human mothers make instinctively. "Max," she said, eyes wide with disbelief and hope. "I think I'm pregnant." The station seemed to hold its breath. I couldn't explain how it was possible, not with science alone. But in that moment, everything we'd fought for, the defiance against fate, the rebellion against labels, was real. I reached for her hand and promised silently that I'd rewrite the stars themselves if it meant protecting this new life. The world outside remained cruel and unyielding, but here in the shadow of broken dreams, a new future was quietly being born. The revelation of Ashera's pregnancy spread through my mind like a wildfire, burning away every certainty I'd clung to. It wasn't just biological anomaly, it was a declaration, a challenge to everything the galaxy believed about her kind. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes, the invisible eyes of Agirus surveillance, and those who branded her defective, closing in. But in that small outpost, beneath the humming power cores and flickering lights, it was just her and me against the universe. Ashera's body began to change in ways both miraculous and terrifying. Her synthetic skin pulsed with a subtle warmth, veins tracing luminous patterns beneath the surface, like circuits reactivated after decades of silence. I monitored her vitals obsessively, analyzing every shift, every irregular heartbeat, desperate for signs of distress or failure. But she thrived. Despite the odds stacked against her, her body was adapting, learning how to carry life where life was never meant to grow. One night, as the air grew cold and the synthetic winds howled outside the station's dome, Ashera confided in me something I hadn't expected, a fear deeper than any code corruption. "Max," she whispered, voice trembling, "I am afraid I will lose this child, that my body will reject what it was never designed to hold." I took her hands in mine, steady and warm, and told her, "We will fight that, together." She looked into my eyes then, and for a moment, the armor of synthetic certainty cracked to reveal something fragile and real. "Do you think I am worthy of this?" Her question hung between us like a fragile promise. I could only answer with my silence and a steady hand on her cheek. The days turned into weeks, and we built a fragile sanctuary, patching the station, encrypting our communications, preparing for the inevitable storm. Rumors whispered of biosec units mobilizing, of termination squads dispatched to silence anomalies like Ashera before they could disrupt the fragile order. Every knock on the door, every shadow that moved too quickly, sent a surge of adrenaline through my veins. But Ashera was not just surviving. She was fighting back. Her voice grew stronger. Her laughter, once a rarity, now filled the hollow spaces of the outpost. She hummed songs I'd never heard, songs from a world I longed to understand. Sometimes she would cradle her belly, whispering promises to the unborn child that no one else dared to hope for. One evening, as we watched the dim light of a dying star flicker through the reinforced glass, she leaned into me and said, "Max, I used to believe I was nothing more than discarded code, but now I know I am the beginning of something new." And in that moment, beneath the vast silence of space, in the cold judgment of distant worlds, I realized that what we were building was more than just a life. It was a revolution. The pressure from the outside world tightened like a noose, invisible but suffocating. Ashera's corporation's biosurveillance drones had intensified their patrols near our sector, their sensors probing for any trace of Ashera's existence. Each alert set my heart racing. I knew they wouldn't hesitate to terminate her, and the child growing inside her, if they found us. But every time fear threatened to paralyze me, Ashera's quiet strength pulled me back. She had changed beyond recognition. The delicate glow beneath her skin had become steady, like the pulse of a living star. Her laughter, once rare and cautious, now filled our cramped quarters with warmth. Yet behind her eyes, I saw the weight of the impossible future we faced. "Max," she said one night, "I dreamt of a world where I could walk freely without hiding, where my child could breathe unafraid." Her words lingered, haunting yet hopeful. I promised her that I would make that world real, but promises were fragile weapons against corporations wielding power without mercy. I began forging alliances in the shadows, contacts from my past life, mercenaries and hackers willing to risk everything to protect a cause they barely understood, but instinctively knew was just. We created false identities, scrambled our digital footprints, and crafted safe routes off-world should we need to flee. Each plan felt like building a lifeboat for a sinking ship, yet none of us dared abandon the fight. Ashera's pregnancy advanced, and with it, her determination deepened. She started training herself, mastering both physical and mental disciplines to prepare for what was to come. One afternoon, she surprised me by hacking into a restricted Ashera's database. "I want to know everything about them," she said, her voice steady and fierce. "If I'm to fight, I need their weapons." Watching her move through firewalls with lethal precision, I realized she was no longer the scared, discarded prototype. She was a warrior forged in pain and hope, ready to reclaim her destiny. Our bond grew stronger too, rooted not just in survival but in love. One night, beneath the faint glow of distant stars, she rested her head against my chest and whispered, "Thank you, Max, for seeing me when no one else would." I held her close, knowing that the life we nurtured was more than a child. It was the promise of a future rewritten by our hands. Outside, the galaxy remained cold and indifferent, but inside our fragile sanctuary, a revolution pulsed stronger than ever. The day came faster than I expected. Ashera's condition demanded more care than the outpost could provide, and the tension in the air was thicker than ever. Every creak of the station, every distant echo, reminded me that time was running out. We had hidden so long beneath the radar, but now the world outside was closing in. Biosec had dispatched a strike team rumored to cleanse any anomalies. I fortified the station's defenses while Ashera rested, her body betraying the strain of carrying a life no one believed possible. I watched her breathe, steady but fragile, and silently vowed I'd do whatever it took to keep her safe. She was no longer just a prototype or a discarded project. She was a mother, a fighter, the embodiment of hope in a galaxy that thrived on control and fear. One evening, as the synthetic twilight bathed the station in hues of violet and blue, she reached out and took my hand. "Max," she whispered, voice barely audible, "I'm scared." I squeezed her hand, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "I know," I said softly, "but we're together." She smiled faintly, and for a moment, the cold machinery around us faded. Our bond was stronger than any protocol or code, but the storm outside was relentless. The strike team breached the perimeter just before dawn. Their armor was cold, their weapons merciless. We fought with everything we had: hacking systems, improvised weapons, desperate courage. Ashera, despite her condition, stood beside me, her eyes blazing with fierce determination. In the chaos, I saw the true extent of her transformation. She was no longer the broken synthetic I'd found. She was a force, raw and unstoppable. Her hands glowed with an energy I couldn't explain. Something ancient, something alive. She used it to shield us, to repel the invaders, to protect the fragile life she carried. When the dust settled, the outpost lay in ruin, but we remained standing. The strike team was gone, scattered or defeated. Ashera collapsed into my arms, exhausted but unbroken. "We've won this battle," I whispered, "but the war is just beginning." She looked up, eyes shining with fierce hope. "Then let's fight for every tomorrow." And with that, beneath the shattered stars and broken sky, we made a silent vow to rewrite our fate together. The aftermath of the assault left scars deeper than the shattered metal around us. Our sanctuary was a shell, flickering with unstable power, but inside a fire burned fiercer than ever. Ashera's strength was fading, her body fighting battles no one could see. I stayed by her side, tending to wounds that went beyond the physical, holding her hand through convulsions of pain and moments of despair. Yet even in those darkest hours, her spirit refused to break. "Max," she whispered one evening, voice weak but resolute, "I feel the child stirring. It's fighting." Her eyes met mine, shimmering with hope and fear. "I want to see our future. I want to hold what we've created." The technology around us was crude, but I rigged a scanning device to project a faint image. There, flickering on the screen, was the silhouette of life, a heartbeat syncing with hers, fragile but undeniable. Tears welled up in my eyes. This was more than code, more than a project. This was love defying the void. But the galaxy wasn't done with us. Word had spread, rebels whispered of the Repro miracle, and corporate forces intensified their hunt. We could no longer hide in the shadows. It was time to move, to find allies beyond the reach of Egoris. With what little resources we had, we prepared for the journey to the Outer Rim, a place rumored to be beyond corporate control. Packing essentials, I watched Ashera gather strength from within, her determination growing despite the odds. "We carry not just a child," she said softly, "but the hope of every forgotten soul." As we launched the shuttle into the void, stars stretched before us like promises. I held her close, feeling the life we nurtured between us, a beacon in the endless darkness. No matter the battles ahead, no matter the sacrifices, we were bound by something unbreakable. Together we would rewrite the fate they tried to erase. The stars outside blurred into streaks as our shuttle hurtled through the void, each pulse of light a reminder of the world we were leaving behind and the uncertain future ahead. Ashera rested beside me, her hand gently cradling the life that had already begun to change everything. I watched her breathing slow, steady in the artificial gravity, and for the first time since this journey began, I allowed myself to believe in hope. The galaxy was vast and cold, filled with systems ruled by fear and control, but we carried a spark that no machine could extinguish. Life born from defiance, love written in code and flesh alike. Ashera's transformation had transcended the limits of science and politics. She was no longer a rejected experiment, but a mother, a symbol, a revolution in motion. I reached out and took her hand, feeling the warmth that no synthetic design could fabricate. "We made it this far," I whispered. "No matter what comes next, we face it together." Her eyes opened, glowing softly with the light of new beginnings. "I am ready," she said, voice filled with quiet strength, "for every battle, every sacrifice, because this child, our child, is the future they tried to steal." In that moment, the cold emptiness of space felt less vast, less isolating. We were no longer just survivors. We were creators of destiny. Together, we would build a world where no one was labeled worthless, where life was sacred beyond any genetic code or protocol. As the shuttle slipped toward the uncharted reaches of the Outer Rim, I knew one truth above all. Our fight was only beginning. But with Ashera beside me, carrying the impossible inside her, I was ready to challenge the stars themselves and rewrite fate, one heartbeat at a time.